Okay, awesome. I'm just getting my agenda up here. Okay, so I will quickly just give a small overview of the committee, as I think I don't know, in our meeting package, we did get like an orientation, so I don't know if that means there's some new members on the call, but I'm getting a head shaking that there is. Yes. Okay, so I'll read my whole little spiel then. So good afternoon, everyone, including members of the public who are could be watching the live webcast. My name is Erica Armstrong, and I'm the outgoing chair of the Design Review Committee. So welcome to this virtual meeting of the DRC being held on August 12th, 2021. The Design Review Committee is a volunteer committee made up of local residents, including several members with professional expertise in architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, and structural engineering. The purpose of the Design Review Committee is to aid in the evaluation of site plan approval applications and wind impact assessments for development within the downtown plan governed by the Downtown Halifax Land Use Bylaw. The Design Review Committee assesses applications for conformity with the Downtown Halifax Design Manual and advise municipal staff accordingly. So I will go through roll call and I'll say your name. And if you can just say here, that would be perfect. So Christina. Charlotte.
Here.
Jessica.
Here.
Hello. Julian.
Here.
Marcel. Marilee.
Here.
Good. Nathan.
Here.
Rob.
Here.
Sandrine.
Here.
This is a lot of new names. Sarah. And then Jan has regrets today. And then we have some staff on the line. So I'll say your name. And if you just want to introduce your role and say hi, Carl.
Hi, everyone. My name's Carl. I manage planning applications at HRM.
Thanks, Carl. Aaron. Maybe Aaron's jumping on later. Karen. I didn't think Karen was going to be here because our site isn't that complicated today. So sometimes we don't have a solicitor when it isn't. So
I think, Madam Chair, I think Sarah Knight might be replacing Karen as the solicitor. We were talking earlier today. So if she's not here yet, she might be arriving sometime soon.
Okay. Thanks, Carl. Dean.
Hi everyone. My name is Dean McDougall. I'm a planner with HRM.
Thanks, Dean. And then we have Annie, who was talking before. If you want to just introduce yourself again.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is, sorry, I have a fan going right beside me. My name is Annie Sherry, and I'm a legislative assistant with the municipal clerk's office. And I will be taking over as the legislative assistant for the design review committee. Really looking forward to getting to know all of you and working with you for however long to come.
Yay, new partner in crime. All right, Jill.
I am here and I'm just here to support Annie with sharing screens and whatnot.
Thanks, Jill. And then we've got our trusty, faithful Alicia, who's been with me at least on this committee for a while.
Yes, I am here to take the minutes. Thank you.
All right. And then we also probably have some of our presenters from the developer on the line. They can introduce themselves when we get to that portion. So now I am going to call an election of chair and vice chair. So I'll just fill in the new members of the committee kind of about how this is coming about. So last year, around this time in the summertime, I stepped into the role as chair. And one of the things that we've been trying to do as a committee is to create better continuity in terms of the vice chair being able to step into the chair role, making room for the next vice chair to have time to learn to then move into the chair role. These are only 2-year terms, although I think we've changed, or we submitted to the city, the councilors, to consider an auto re-election if persons volunteers to step up for the next 2 years. I can't remember if that got passed or not, but this is just something that we've been doing as a committee to try to create a better knowledge base so that we can pass hands when people leave the committee, and people are ready to step into that chair and vice chair role and keep the knowledge going. So it's my turn to step down to make room for the vice chair, to make room for a new vice chair so they can start learning towards the chair process. So I will open the floor to nominations for, and I should probably say before I open nominations that we've been working towards voting Mara Lee, who is the vice chair, into this chair position. I don't know if I can nominate her. So if I can't, I'm just putting that out there so that someone else can. So I will open the floor to nominations for the position of chair.
I will nominate Mary Lee if you can't do it, Erica.
Okay, perfect. So Jess will nominate Mary Lee. I'll call for, and I need to call 3 times according to, Annie's raising her hand to me. I probably already screwed it up.
No. Sorry, you're doing great.
Okay.
I would just advise that potentially where we have received your official resignation, that potentially it would be a bit more appropriate for me to take over as clerk of the committee at this point.
I would love that.
Okay, I didn't mean to take the wind out of your sails there. You're doing a
No.
wonderful job. Okay.
The less opportunity I have to mess it up, the better. So you go for it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have a nomination for chair on the floor that has been moved by Jess Harper for Mary Lee. And do I have a seconder for that nomination? Okay, and I see a second from Erica Armstrong. So it has been moved and seconded that Mary Lee be nominated for chair. Mary Lee, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Wonderful, thank you. So now I will call for any further nominations for the position of chair. Okay, second time out of 3. Are there any further nominations for the position of chair? And third and final call, are there any further nominations for the position of chair? All right, hearing none, I will call for a mover and a seconder to close nominations. I
will
see.
close nominations.
Thank you, Jess. And do I have a seconder on the closing of nominations?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Nathan. All those in favor of closing nominations, say aye.
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 Wonderful. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries and nominations are now closed. We have one person put forward for the position of chair. If there is no discussion on the matter, I'd be happy to call the question or ask another member of the committee to call the question on the final vote. Alrighty, then hearing none, I will call. Or I guess, yeah, so we'll now vote on the nominations. So the Mary Lee's nomination was moved by Jess Harper, seconded by Erica Armstrong. All those in favor of nominating Marilee as the chair of the Design Review Committee. Sorry, and I should say aye or
Aye.
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 Anybody contrary minded? All right, and hearing none, the motion is carried and the Design Review Committee has a brand new chair. Congratulations, Marilee.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Wonderful. So with that, we can move on to the election of vice chair. And then after that position has been filled, Marilee will take over and chair the rest of the meeting. So I will start now with opening the nominations for the position of vice chair.
Marilee, tell him it's not that bad.
Honestly, not that bad, everybody.
I'll just say from experience, like because we have legislative assistants, they support us so much. There's really not, it's not labor intensive.
No, essentially what you see in the meetings is what happens on our side. Erica and I have tag teamed a couple times on meetings, but that's about it. Don't everybody jump up at once.
So I'll call me one more time just to remind everyone that we're voting on a name to put forward to nominate as the position of vice chair. And if folks were unaware, if you are interested in putting yourself forward, you are able to nominate yourself as long as it is seconded by someone else. That is all good.
And then also, I think it's possibly pertinent to mention that as we discussed in previous meetings, the DRC, as Center Plan B gets adopted, is going to dissolve. So there is a chance that you would never end up as chair if that's what you're afraid of. It's really just that coverage of if if Marilee has to step away, that someone can just read Robert's rules essentially and work through the meeting. But I'll remind everyone that I'm just a civilian. I'm not even a expert in this case, but I think I was able to carry things through as chair decently. So don't worry about that either.
There's also a script if it helps anybody.
Come on, Jess, you know you want to.
Well, I was thinking that if someone, like my term's up soon, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to sit next year with my husband's upcoming sailing schedule. So I didn't know if someone that would be more on long-term would step up to do it, to learn to take over maybe.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Didn't know you were a mill spouse. Me too.
Yeah. I have a deployment coming in January, so.
Fair. Okay. So if nobody else after this conversation, then maybe Jess could step up, and I won't put pressure on you if you really don't want to, till for the next 6 months. And then, because we do have a lot of new committee members,
Make time to get used to what we do.
Which I'm fine to do. I was just thinking if somebody newer wanted to step up who was going to be around longer than maybe my term would be.
Because Julian, how long have you been on?
I've been on since March, I believe.
Yes, so you're still newer, but you're less new than all these other new people. Poor you. Because like Marcel is another person, he's not here today, but he has also been on the committee for a while, and same with Sarah. So there are a few options for vice chair that could come into play. So maybe Jess, if you don't mind, but Annie, maybe you give some guidance. If Jess steps up today, she could always resign by next meeting if Sarah then decides it's something I want to do, I just wasn't here for it.
That is absolutely procedurally possible. I think It's up to the will of the committee and the will of the person putting their name forward. At the end of the day, if there is another instance where there needs to be an election for a vice chair down the road, as long as we have enough notice, I will absolutely facilitate that in this meeting space.
I know that Nathan has been here for as long as I have because we began together. I have worked with Nathan and I will nominate Nathan for that position.
All right, thank you. So we have a nomination for on the floor right now that has been moved by Julian Gonzalez for Nathan to be put forward as vice chair. Do I have a seconder on that nomination? Erica Armstrong is the seconder. Wonderful. Okay, so we have that moved and seconded as Nathan for the vice chair. So at this point, I will call for any further nominations for the position of vice chair.
Does he have to accept it though?
Right, you do. My apologies. Nathan, do you accept the nomination?
All right, I'll accept that. I'm going to need a lot of help though. If it's approved, I'll need a lot of help.
We can do it, Nathan. Don't worry.
That is what we are all here for. There is a legion of staff and friendly colleagues around the table here who will certainly help. So the nomination has been accepted. I will call again for any further nominations for the position of vice chair. Second time, are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Third and final time, are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? All right, hearing none, could I please have a motion to close nominations?
I'll do that.
Marilee, we have a mover to close nominations. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jess. So we have a mover and a seconder to close nominations. I will put that to a vote. All in favor of closing nominations, please say aye.
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 And any contrary minded? All right, hearing none, nominations have closed. So we have a motion on the floor that has been moved by Julian and seconded by Erica for Nathan to be put forward as the vice chair. Is there any further discussion on this motion?
Thank you, Nathan.
All right. Hearing no more discussion, I'll call for the question. So I will call for a vote. All of those in favor of Nathan being put forward as vice chair, please say aye.
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 All right, any opposed? Abstentions? All right, wonderful. So we now have our chair and vice chair newly elected. Congratulations both to Marilee and to Nathan. So now I will hand it over to Marilee, who will run the rest of the meeting as chair. And Marilee already has this kind of scripted document that is going to help guide the rest of the meeting. Marilee, if there's anything procedurally that you would like some further clarification on, please don't hesitate to ask. And Nathan, you'll also be in receipt of that should there be some sort of tech fail and Marilee has to vacate the meeting. So congratulations to you both. And Marilee, I'll let you take the wheel.
Great. Thank you, Annie. Bear with me, everybody. This is my first time following the full script, so we'll see how this goes. Our last meeting was held on June 10th, 2021, and the minutes were issued after that. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of June 10th, 2021?
I'll approve the minutes. Motion to approve.
Thank you, Jess. And can we get a seconder as well?
Second.
Nathan, great, thank you. So we have it mover, Jess Harper, and seconder Nathan. Is it Guy or Guy?
I go by Guy.
Guy, okay, just making sure. Are there any errors or omissions from the minutes from June 10th? Hearing none, okay. So I will call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying a yay or nay to approve the minutes from June 10th, 2021.
Yay.
Yay.
Great, thank you very much. Moving into approval of the order of business. Are there any additions or modifications to today's agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The clerk's office did not receive any requests for additions, deletions, or other modifications to the agenda for today.
Great, thank you. And to the committee members, you would have received that agenda today. Are there any modifications that you'd like to request at this time?
Annie, we're going to talk about the correspondence, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'm good then.
Okay. So with the addition, I guess, of the correspondence, that would be the only change. Can I have a motion to approve today's agenda? We'll need a mover and a seconder.
I can move. Erica.
Erica, seconder.
I can second, Rob.
Rob LeBlanc, thank you. So Erica and Rob are the movers and the seconders. So I will call for approval of the agenda amended to include the correspondence that was added. All those in favor, yay or nay? Or yay, I guess.
Yay.
Okay. Any nays? Nope. Okay, so the meeting agenda has been approved. Is there any business arising out of the minutes? Don't believe so. No. Okay. Moving into call for declaration. Are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared as a result of the agenda that was circulated for any of the committee members?
Can I just ask a quick question here? Because I normally, when new committee members are on the committee, we all have to sit through the orientation for like the third or fourth time, but that's not happening right now. So did they get oriented at a different time? They did.
Sorry, this is this is Annie from the clerk's office. So a bit of a timing thing across the board. So there will be an orientation taking place today for the kind of, nuts and bolts of the design review committee at large. And then between myself and Andrea, we will be hosting another orientation session with each of the new members before the next meeting in September. But each of the new members of the committee have also received documentation to kind of help guide through the meeting. But of course, if there are any questions on procedure or folks need clarification throughout the meeting on kind of what's happening in the order of events, please don't hesitate to ask or put your name in the chat.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that in terms of conflict of interest, yeah. So maybe Annie, do you want to tell them what it means in this particular case?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. So in this instance, if the declaration of conflict of interest, it is solely within the purview of the individual to determine whether or not they are in a conflict. We cannot tell you if you are, but if a project is being discussed through which you might have a specific interest, whether like personal or pecuniary, it would be advised that would be the kind of opportunity for you to declare a conflict of interest. And if you were to declare a conflict of interest during discussion on that agenda item, we would ask that you turn your camera off and mute yourself so that you are not taking part in discussion, and then you can return to the meeting after that item has been discussed. So yeah. There's always a standing agenda item so that folks have the opportunity to declare whether or not they might have a conflict of interest on something on the agenda.
So that being said, I know I've asked the question once, but now that we maybe have a more clear understanding of what how it's defined with this committee, does anybody have any potential conflict of interest that they'd like to disclose at this time? Okay. In terms of item number 6, deferred business, we have none at this time. Item number 7, correspondence, petitions, and delegations. There was one piece of correspondence that was circulated. Sorry, I'm just reading this as we go. Has everybody had an opportunity to read the correspondence that was sent? So at this point, we have the opportunity to discuss it. We can decide to either take no action. We can request a draft response, or we can forward correspondence to relevant staff for a response, or we can request staff to provide the committee with information, either an update, presentation, etc., on a topic arising from it. And this is a topic, as Erica mentioned earlier, that has been come to our attention over the last couple of meetings, the changing role with the center plan being adopted. So, and how that will impact the design review committee. Anybody have any thoughts or anything they want to share?
I can give a little bit of a primer as to where this came from if you want.
Sure.
So Ted used to be on, who sent the correspondence, used to be on the DRC. He's now on he's the chair of the DAC, as you can see from the letter signed. And so they are having similar discussions on their committee about package B. And what I guess one of the things our committee and their committee didn't really know when discussing package B and going through the process is that we gave recommendations to the city as to our thoughts on the package, but that could be completely stripped out of the conversation. That would eventually go to council just saying approved because we approved it. So if we did want to put any quote unquote teeth behind our comments by putting an actual motion forward, then the council would have to consider it. So that's basically what the correspondence is saying. And I will leave it there for the committee to discuss.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I provide a little context, if that's all right?
Please, go ahead.
Wonderful. So I just wanted to outline kind of the order of events and kind of where what the committee can do at this point to add any other like thoughts or concerns to be passed along to regional council. So the center plan was put forward and discussed at the last meeting of the design review committee that took place in June. And at that meeting, the design review committee voted on approving the recommendations that were put forward. This report is now going, along with all of the other series of reports through which Center Plan Package B has gone through, are now going to be going to council next week. So because the committee has already voted on on that item at this point in time, there is not actually a procedural mechanism in place to be able to put forward an additional motion on the matter at this point in time, because it is going to be discussed at the forthcoming meeting of regional council. So what I would potentially suggest as an alternative would be for, if any member of the committee has concerns or additional pieces that they would like to provide on the passing of Center Plan B at regional council, every committee member is individually empowered to write in as a citizen and speak to the concerns that they have on Center Plan Package B or anything that they would like to see changed there. But at this point, it is not currently within the committee's capacity to be able to put forward a motion as a group and change the recommendations that have already been put forward. If there are further questions on that, I know we have legal here as well, but just wanted to make sure that we were all working with the same understanding and that there are absolutely still tools that you each have to be able to to have any concerns that you might have heard. But just, yeah, that's kind of the path forward at this point in time.
So there's no motion that can be done on this piece of correspondence specifically, like put a motion to council?
I might call on our legal representative to maybe kind of outline that.
I mean, that might not even be the route we want to go. I'm just asking if it is possible so we know our options.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sarah.
Okay, I don't know why my camera isn't working, but so in that respect, one of the options available to the committee is to forward the correspondence to council for council's consideration. That would be the primary mechanism of moving it forward to council at this time.
Okay.
So you'd motion to move it to council?
To forward it.
Yes.
Because essentially the crux of it is with the adoption of the center plan, the DRC will lose our authority, for lack of a better word. I mean, at this time we can, if we decide to overrule a recommendation coming from the planning department, we do so through these meetings, a recommendation for a variance per se. Whereas the committee that is overseeing the projects that fall under the center plan can make recommendations, but they can't overrule. Is that the clear distinction between the two committees?
They have no legislative
Authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So essentially what is outlined in the letter is, and what we had discussed kind of in our last committee meeting is that then it only falls to the one planning officer and the 3-person, I think, committee of the counselors that the center plan apply to.
But
which could be fine,
Yeah.
I think that's what we're just trying to discuss. And I guess my thoughts on it when I finish, because like we only have 2-hour meetings, and then it's like you have your time to decompress and really think about it, is I guess I don't know the background as to like what best practices went into that decision. Like, did they build it off of like other cities that are of similar size, and that's how they came to this process of like getting the decision-making process and who's involved in looking at variances? So I guess I should have asked during that meeting, like, what are the best practices and who are we following that are doing a similar thing? And I think Carl's got his hand raised.
Yeah, Carl, do you have a?
Hello, everyone. So as far as I know, and as far as anyone else that I've asked, Halifax is the only city in Canada that has this model of a delegated authority to some other group other than council or staff. So in this change that the center plan team is proposing, it's actually going back into, I'm not, if you want to call it best practice, I'm not sure, but it's back into the larger herd in terms of this is the approach. So the reason that this committee, as I understand it, was sort of given this authority when the rules were first created, was that there were 2 decisions to be made. There was the quantitative, and that's a pretty binary one. It either is 3 meters away from a property line or it isn't. And then the qualitative, that's where there was sort of this extra vetting that it was felt that this committee would be useful. So even though the variances are staying in the center plan, the variance criteria is becoming much more quantitative. So that qualitative assessment is basically no longer in the plan, which was again the reason, or one of the big reasons anyways, for why this committee was created in the first place. So perhaps that helps.
I know certainly any of the municipalities that I've worked with, the community members have never been given the level of authority that our committee has. Julian?
Yeah, I don't see, we had a presentation on package B, I believe, in our past meeting or the previous one. I fail to see the link where the design review committee becomes disbanded when this is approved. And being so that this is the only city in Canada where we have this, I see it as a magnificent tool for including other views into approving or disapproving variances. It came to me as a surprise when I saw the correspondence when it was sent today, shortly before the meeting. And I think I need more background on where is the exact link where if that becomes approved, this becomes disbanded. I have no interest in, any personal interest in this, but I do see it as a magnificent tool for cities becoming more inclusive in terms of decisions that affect all the citizens. So my point is, I fail to see this link, and I need more input on that, probably legal input.
And I don't know if this is a question more for Sarah or for Carl. And this was touched on, and I don't remember the details in our last meeting as to what categories of projects would still fall under our jurisdiction.
Madam Chair, maybe I can give it a try. Yeah. So there's the downtown area, which is the only place where this particular process applies. And if package B were to be adopted, the area that this process would still apply as the DRC knows it today would be condensed to only the areas where there is a heritage conservation district. So it would be all the way along Barrington and the old south suburb, sort of further towards Peace and Friendship Park at the south end of Barrington. That would be the limitation. The reason for that is that there is a lot of hoops to jump through to get a heritage conservation district adopted. And basically the time wasn't there between when the center plan was going to be adopted and the time when sort of that was worked out to get all of that work done. So the plan is to create, to update, and go through that process of updating the heritage districts. And at that point, I think the plan is to consolidate everything into a single plan, a single bylaw, a single document. But during the interim period, this committee would still be doing the work within those heritage districts because the old bylaw would apply. So I'd say, you know, I'm going to throw out numbers, which I don't like doing, but it's probably, you know, it's probably down to about 20% maybe of its original size just geographically. That's probably not going to correspond directly to, it's going to be that same reduction in applications because obviously there's different interest in different areas, but that gives you an order of magnitude.
And then can you throw out another number, Carl? Let's do some guessing here. So how long do you think until the heritage district is fully absorbed into the center plan and then DRC would truly cease to exist?
It wouldn't be faster than a year. I think it would be longer than that.
Okay.
So 12 to 24 months, possibly.
Perhaps.
Okay. Okay, so with all of those thoughts, does anybody have any other comments or questions? Nathan, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I guess just trying to understand the driving force behind the letter. It seems that there's some concern about citizen involvement. If if there is an eventual sort of disbandment of the DRC, what would be the avenue for the citizen involvement moving forward?
My understanding is it would still be through the DAC,
Okay.
as well as the community consultation that is required through the planning process. But the community wouldn't necessarily have a decision-making authority. They would provide comments and recommendations. Carl?
Yeah, and
is
I
that-
think the decision would be made by the development officer in all cases currently through site plan approval under the center plan, correct?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if you're familiar with sort of the public engagement continuum, we're moving from empower to inform.
And I think this letter, if I understand it correctly, is that it's not to necessarily push a binding power, but it is to make sure that council is aware, that all of council is aware that that binding power is being taken away. And so what is civic engagement and community involvement going to look like in the development process, and just trying to push them to have a discussion.
So if that's the case, then maybe forwarding the letter, since we aren't in a position to be able to put a motion forward, forwarding the letter would at least notify them. Oh, sorry, Annie, you had a...
Sorry, that was a little premature, Madam Chair. I was just going to say that if there is a desire on behalf of the committee to put forward a motion to forward the correspondence along to council, I have a draft motion ready if that is the desire of the committee, but it does not have to be. It's just, it is there should you want that.
Okay. So how does everybody feel about that option? Would that address the concerns and bring it forward to council, or do people have other questions or concerns that we should, Charlotte?
Hi, I think, like, from, being brand new here and kind of figuring out what it is about, I think it would be too bad if the decision was removed from, from the power of the DRC. So I'd push to send it. I think it's a good idea to try and see what we can do to keep involvement within civilians and everything as much as possible.
Thank you. So it looks like Annie has put a potential draft forward, draft motion. If everybody can see that in their chat. So with that in mind, is there anyone that would like to make the motion? Or do we need to open it up for further discussion?
Both, I would say, for discussion and a motion to forward the correspondence to regional council.
Okay, in terms of the further discussion, Julian, is there specific aspects or that you'd like to discuss today, or just that this needs to be an ongoing conversation as part of a larger picture?
Yes, your second thought. That.
Okay. Understood. So Julian, would you, is that you motioning?
I will motion that.
Okay. Not to push you into that, but just, would you mind reading it just for the video?
Yes, that the design review committee forward the August 12, 2021 correspondence to regional council for their consideration.
Great, thank you. And is there a seconder for that motion as well?
I'll second.
From Charlotte, thank you. So I believe we need to put that to a vote. Is that correct? Okay, so can we, sorry, I'm not very good at. Everyone in favor of forwarding the correspondence to Regional Council for consideration, you can say aye.
I,
Aye.
Are there any nays? No? Okay, I believe that one has passed then. Thank you everyone for bearing with me through that. Okay, so moving back to our agenda and the remaining items, looks like there are no petitions and information items brought forward. There are none of those. So we move into reports. And I believe there is a presentation by Carl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recognizing we're 45 minutes into this, I'm going to try to be brief, and we'll do less than a minute a slide here. Annie, do you want me to share? Do you want how is that the easiest?
Sure. If I just gave you the permission to share, so if you want to give it a go, I know it hasn't always worked, but we can try, and if not, Jill is ready to share as well.
All righty, give it a go. Can the committee see a slide that says Design Review Committee orientation?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. We'll go full screen there. Still good? Okay, wonderful. Let's just jump right into it. So what is the purpose of the DRC? So in terms of this orientation, I'll speak to the rules as they exist today, not in the future, but today and largely for the last 10 years. So the purpose of the DRC is to administer this site plan approval process, which is the way that buildings are built and constructed and approved in the downtown. So they do the evaluation primarily against a document called the design manual. So everything that the municipality does, it has to be sort of said that you're allowed to do this within a document called the Halifax Charter. That's something given to us by the province, and it basically outlines all of our powers. And in the charter, it specifically says that our design review committee shall exercise the powers of the development officer for the area and under the conditions set out in the bylaw. So we've got the province, the power comes down to the charter, and then the charter basically points to the land use bylaw. The land use bylaw talks specifically about the committee that you're a part of. It says that the committees should consider the applications for substantive site plan approval applications, like the one you're going to be hearing from Dean in a few minutes. Consider the advice of the Heritage Committee on sites that where heritage matters apply, and advise the development officer on matters about density bonusing. So in essence, they're in areas of the downtown, there is a certain maximum height that you are allowed to achieve. And then there is a different maximum, a higher maximum of height, what's called a post-bonus density height, which can be achieved if you provide some type of public benefit or amenity. So the committee will, in cases where that applies, the committee will be presented with, this is the amenity from a given list in the bylaw that they're proposing, and the committee will advise the development officer as to whether they think that's appropriate, and also advise council on potential amendments to these regulations and the policies to carry out the roles and responsibilities of the committee, which is very much what you were doing on your last item in that correspondence and what you did in the last meeting in terms of seeing what the package B changes would bring. So what is site plan approval? So this type of site plan approval, where the DRC is in charge of making the qualitative decisions, it's applied only in downtown Halifax. Of all of our 5,500 square kilometers, it's only here. And it's intended to be a shorter, streamlined process as compared to what we previously used, which is development agreements. So it has two types of rules within the policy that need to be applied, and any given building needs to meet both sets of rules. One is the quantifiable, which I mentioned in our previous discussion, which is you can be 15 meters tall. You need to be 3 meters away from a property line. You can cover this percentage of the property. These are binary. They're ones, they're zeros, they meet it or they don't. But also the qualitative. The building should fit into its context. The building should be compatible with its surroundings, sort of what I call maybe fluffier things that we need your help in assessing. Not all requirements can be varied. So there are certain aspects of the bylaw to say that, yes, you have to be X number of meters away from a property line. However, if these certain conditions are met, it might be okay for them to be either a little bit less or a little bit more. And that is one of the decisions, one of the key decisions that this committee is in charge of, deciding as to whether or not a given building is meeting those variance criteria, those standards. Not everything can be varied though. You can't build a building into the view plane. And notwithstanding anything that either the development officer or that this committee might say, we can't approve something that's built into the view plane. So not all aspects of the bylaw can be varied. And all of the staff reports that you'll receive will be explicit about what can and what cannot. So in terms of the process, there's 4 large steps. And the first one is actually optional. So the first step that any applicant has at their disposal is they can come in for a presentation early in the stages of their development. So they can come in and seek your feedback about, what do you think about this aspect of the building? They can have something that is very detailed in terms of, detailed, ready to build floor plans and all the elevations, or they can come in with a massing model and just say, this is sort of the shape of the building and its siting on the site, or they can come in with an idea. So I'd say that this happens about, it's not an incredibly popular option. It might happen in about 15 to 20% of the applications that we see. Then we come in for a pre-application. So basically proposals are reviewed by the planner or the development officer, and they say, these are the things that you meet in the bylaw. These are the things that you don't meet in the bylaw. And in that second list, we need to make sure that you actually have the ability to seek a variation for them. So most of the pre-application process is clarifying what's been submitted, seeking a little bit more information, making sure the plans are well labeled, there's no contradictions within them, and then doing that bylaw review to make sure that everything's squared away so that it comes to you, we're going to be good. Also, it needs to be squared away before it goes to public consultation. So as the chair mentioned earlier, there is a public consultation that's required. Applicants need to advertise their development in the newspaper, create their own website, and then we put some display boards in sort of conspicuous areas within the downtown. Previously, they were at our front desk where we actually manage the permit activity in our Alderney office and our Bayers Road office, as well as the one in Scotia Square downtown. Right now, they're in Scotia Square, but where in different times that these service centers have been closed, we've been putting them at the Mumford bus terminal, as well as the bus terminal, the indoor waiting area within Scotia Square. And after that public consultation is completed, then we're into this step of the formal application. A report is written, the materials are compiled, and it comes to you in the form of an agenda item, which you'll be seeing again that Dean will lead you through in a minute. So as I mentioned, qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative being the numerical, the height, the massing, the scale, the street wall step backs. The qualitative is more about the design, the streetscape details, the materials. The qualitative is the purview of this specific committee, in addition to those variations that I mentioned before. So as I mentioned, the downtown bylaw provides the use and the built form. So these are the uses that you're allowed to have in the building, as well as what the building needs to be looking like in terms of those numerical values. It's explicit, as I said, about what aspects of the bylaw can and cannot be varied, and it's administered by the development officer. So that's one half of the policies. The second half is within the purview of this committee. It's the design manual. It's part of the bylaw, and it's meant to be the primary reference document used for this design review component of the site plan approval process that you do. So this design manual provides the qualitative elements that an application within the downtown needs to have, and as well as a certain section near the back, it provides all of the criteria where variances need to be evaluated against. So again, in the reports that you receive, we'll do that work for you. We won't just give you the plans cold and say, find the variances. We'll outline, it will say, variance number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as seen on this plan, and they will be labeled as the same in the plan. We'll identify which criteria apply to the variance that's needed, and then we'll give you an opinion or a suggestion as to whether or not we think that this particular building in this context, in this situation, meets that. This is ultimately, though, this decision is yours. The committee can't decide that the 18-meter tall building is 15 meters, but they can certainly decide and go contrary to the staff recommendation to say that this variance either is appropriate, even though staff said it isn't, or the opposite. So section 3.6 is the design manual section. That's sort of the key one, and it has that variance criteria. The committee needs to consider the criteria in making their decision. So this is sort of the unfortunate thing, or one of the unfortunate aspects, where you are design professionals, you're here for your expertise, your knowledge in the area of design. However, ultimately, if you feel like this variance, it would make the building better, it would, would speak to the street, it would fit the context, well, that's great. But what we're boxing you in a little bit, and we're saying, but does it meet this criteria? So it's a little unfortunate where, we don't have the world is not our oyster. As I said, not everything in the bylaw can be varied. And if it is varied, it has to meet this criteria. Otherwise, it might be subject to an appeal. Ultimately, it would go to regional council if it were to appeal. And we've had that happen a few times recently. So an example. Here's an example of the variance criteria that apply to a street wall. So the design manual says that street wall heights, so basically the portion of the building closest to the street before it steps back and reaches its full height, that portion of the height of that can be varied by site plan approval where, so A, the street wall height is consistent with the objectives and guidelines of the design manual. That's in most of our variance criteria. That's sort of the blanket statement to say it needs to be consistent with generally the intent and the objectives of the design manual at large. And then we have more specific ones. You'll note in this particular one that B and C are ors. So basically it needs to be A and one of B, C, or D. Some of the variance criteria are ands, which means it might have to be A and B and C and D. It might have to be all of the four. So again, our reports will outline all of these. So in the case of a street wall variance, you can maybe have a street wall height that is different than what the bylaw calls for if the modification is for a corner element that's used to join the street walls at different heights. The abutting height buildings are so different that it wouldn't be consistent if we went with the bylaw number, or where a landmark building element is called for pursuant to the design manual. So this is a picture that's, an example of if they were building in that sort of parking lot that's in the middle of these two buildings. If, for example, the bylaw for some strange reason called for a 23-meter street wall, and it wouldn't, but say as an example, and you said, and the architect or the applicant in this case said, well, that height of a street wall wouldn't be consistent. It's a very consistent street wall along this particular street. I can show that. I will show plans to illustrate that. And so, that's something they would be applying for the variance criteria C, saying that, well, if we made the street wall of the height that's illustrated in the bylaw, it would not be consistent with the character of the street. That's the one that we are applying under. And that's what the staff report would be discussing, the back and forth between what the applicant said, the staff evaluation, and then it would be over to you as the committee. Three options that the committee has in terms of issuing a decision at the end of the day. They can say, we do not feel that this building is consistent with the design manual, or the variances are not consistent with the design manual. You can approve the application, or you can approve the application with conditions. You can say, yes, we agree that this building meets the intent of the design manual, with the exception that we feel that the street wall height needs to be reduced by 1 meter, or whatever the case might be. So you can approve with conditions. Updates to the documents, as you already know and hear, these rules are going to be changing. The committee recently received a presentation on these amendments, and the final draft of the documents is moving forward to council over the course of 2021. Last I heard, I believe it might be on committee of the whole as early as next week, perhaps. But we'll wait for the agenda for council to come out tomorrow. A typical TRC agenda, usually, and this is what you'll be seeing next, a presentation from the planner, Dean in our case this evening, then a presentation from the applicant as desired by the committee, questions from the committee to either the applicant or the planner or myself. I'm generally at all of these meetings, whereas the planners might come in and come out given what applications they might be assigned. You then put the motion in the report on the floor, you debate that, and you make your decision. That's all I have.
Thank you, Carl. So now we'll open it up to the committee members for questions. I'll go through based on the roll call that I have. Do we have Christina on the line? I don't believe so. Open it up for Christina. No? Okay. Charlotte, any questions for you?
All good, thank you.
Okay. Erica?
I'm okay, thanks.
Okay. Jessica?
I'm good, thanks.
Julian?
Yeah, just a clarification again. I remember there was a discussion in a previous meeting about a developer who proposed, there was a variance in the plans. I believe it was about height. And there were two options there. There was the option of, let's say, balancing out the variance with installing underground power lines in that building, or putting up street art. It was discussed in the committee, and that is not something that is even touching base on any engineering or architectural, but more about life in the city, because we know the advantages of underground power lines, but we also know the advantages of street art. So in that case, I don't see where such a decision will be made by any body except for the design review committee. And I recall that case in which I, by the way, excluded myself out of conflict of interest in the discussion and vote. However, I was aware of the issues that were debated. So my question is, who would make those calls if the design review committee was disbanded?
Through you, Madam Chair, the way that the draft bylaw is written, it in essence says that it's shrunk the list of density bonusing amenities. So it's condensed the list to ostensibly the items or the amenities that the municipality wishes to receive the most. So before it was a larger menu of options, now it's much more condensed. So in essence, the way that the new rules would work is that if you are providing one of those options, the decision is that whatever it is, it's desirable by us because it's a much more condensed list, and therefore it will be accepted. So as long as it meets the definition of what exactly that is and the amount and how that amount is calculated, et cetera, that's something that would be taken.
Any further questions, Julian? No? Okay.
No, thanks.
Do we have Marcel? Don't believe so. Okay. I didn't have any questions. Thank you, Carl. Nathan, how about you?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. Rob?
No, thanks for the presentation, Carl.
Sandrine?
No question for me, thanks.
Okay. And Sarah McDonald, we don't have today, and Jen has sent her regrets. So that's everyone. Thank you very much, Carl. Appreciate it. Next is the upcoming applications. Are there any that we need to be aware of for future meetings?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was hoping to have one that was deemed complete this morning, and alas, it is not. So I don't have any updates for you, but as soon as I do, I'll send those via Annie over and to the committee your way.
Okay. And just for the new committee members, because we've had a couple of larger applications come through with some discussions, we had asked that Carl provide us with an update at each meeting of what we can anticipate, so that we're prepared, because there sometimes can be a short timeline considering the size of the application, to review it in advance of our next meeting. So sorry, Carl, go ahead.
Yes, I will say now that I'm thinking about it, I believe that the next meeting of the design review committee is in the second week of September, I think is when it is. And there is one
September 9th.
Yes, there is one application that it's very possible that it's working its way towards that date. It is the redevelopment of the Mills Brothers site on Spring Garden Road at the corner of Spring Garden and Queen. So that's something that is working its way through the process, and there's a report that's written. So hopefully that'll be ready. We'll get that to you as soon as we can. It's a mixed-use development with an internal sort of square that takes up the full block, and backing onto that relatively recently done development to the south of it.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to case number 23725, substantive site plan approval for 1649 Bedford Row. I'll hand it over to Dean for your presentation, and then we'll move into questions.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to share my screen. Can you confirm that my slide is up for everybody and is in full screen? Yeah, okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much. My name is Dean McDougall, and I'm a planner for HRM, and I'll be providing the presentation for the site plan approval known as case 23725 for 1649 Bedford Row in Halifax. So the applicant for this application is Root Architecture Inc. on behalf of the property owner. As I mentioned, the location is 1649 Bedford Row. And the proposal is to construct a 12-story mixed-use building with ground floor commercial and 33 residential units. So the site is located on Bedford Row, which is near the intersection, or which is also the site's located near the intersection with Sackville Street. You can see here it's outlined in red on the context maps. In terms of the regulations on it through the Downtown Halifax Land Use Bylaw, it's zone DH1. It's found in precinct 4, and it is part of the center block. In terms of height, there's a 39-meter pre-bonus maximum height, and then there's a 49-meter post-bonus maximum height. The street wall setbacks are 0 to 1.5 meters, and street wall heights a minimum of 11 meters to 18.5 meters maximum. So here's an ortho view of the subject site. You can see it's shown in red and where it's located in relation to Sackville Street, as I mentioned, but also Prince Street, Lower Water, and the harbor. Here's a Google Street image of the subject site as if you're standing on the corner of Bedford Row and Sackville Street. Some people may be familiar with the site as Great Wall, a Chinese food restaurant. And this is the subject site looking south on Bedford Road towards Sackville Street. And here are the proposed renderings of the project taken from various vantage points, but as you would be seen from the Bedford Row. So you have the street wall and ground floor commercial, which is clearly distinguished and recognizable. And I won't spend too much time going on the design, as the applicant has a presentation following mine, and they'll go into greater detail on that. But I will quickly show some of the elevations that are attached in the staff report. This would be the west elevation that fronts Bedford Row. This is the north elevation, south elevation, and lastly, the east elevation. So this would be the view as if you're on Lower Water Street, roughly maybe perhaps by the Maritime Museum. So design manual. There are some items for discussion that are outlined in the staff report, but I'll expand on a little bit here. So there are two sections of the design manual that I'd like to highlight, and they are sections 331D and 332C, which encourage all publicly viewed facades to have a consistent design expression, and that materials used in the front street facades should be carried around the building where any facade is exposed to the public view. So as the existing surrounding built environment consists of 2 to 7-story buildings, the rear and side elevations, as shown on the slide here, they'll be visible until such time that the abutting properties are redeveloped. So to address these blank walls, the applicant is proposing detailing the interior lot line facades to provide visual interest. So materials used in the street-facing facade will wrap around to the exposed interior lot lines facades, and windows are proposed on the north and south facades that can be altered in the future when neighboring developments begin. So in the interim, these windows will require fire shutters. And then lastly, to provide interest on the harbor facing side, the applicant proposes accent variation with 3 different panel sizes that appear in a control pattern. And the applicant will expand and speak more to this in their presentation. In terms of requested variances, there's only one requested variance to the land use bylaw, and that's the upper story side yard setback. So the land use bylaw requires that any portion of the building that's above 33.5 meters in height must be set back 11.5 meters from the side and rear property boundaries. So that 33.5 meter height would be the black line. And then anything above that 33.5 meter height is highlighted in red on the plan you see in front of you. So the applicant is requesting that this 11.5 meter setback be reduced down to 0 meters. So for the penthouse amenity area, as well as the mechanical rooftop features. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I'm so used to saying next slide because I usually don't have control. So staff recommend that approval of the requested variance, as we believe it satisfies the evaluation criteria outlined in the design manual. So the proposed variance is required to provide a clear and distinguished top to the building, as well as a pleasing roofscape for view from other adjacent higher properties. And these are both things that the design manual encourages. And then the maximum permitted height for this building is the post bonus, which is 49 meters. And the proposed total height of the development is just under the 39 meters in height. So this 10-meter reduction in height is proportional to the requested reduction in side yard setback from 11.5 to 0 meters. So as such, staff recommend approval of the variance. A wind assessment was also completed that concluded the development will result in appropriate wind comfort conditions along the sidewalks, and the predicted wind speeds are expected to meet the pedestrian wind safety standards. So there's no concerns raised by the study for the public realm. The study did note that higher than desirable wind activity is expected on the rooftop patio. So the proposal intends to mitigate these possible wind conditions by employing appropriate wind control measures, such as a windscreen, to block and disperse the prevailing winds from the south. And that windscreen can be seen on the elevations. So staff recommend that the design review committee approve the qualitative elements of the substantive site plan approval. 2, approve the 1 variance to the land use bylaw, and 3, accept the findings of the qualitative wind impact assessment. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dean. Okay, I'll open it up to the committee members. I'll call on you by name if you have any questions to address to Dean. We'll start with Charlotte.
No questions. Thank you.
Erica, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Jess.
Hi, thanks, Dean, for your presentation. Can you bring it back up for 1 second and go to your variation slide? I just want to make sure I'm understanding something.
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second.
Sorry, you closed it all down.
Well, I zoomed it. I don't know why. Yes, I will bring that up for you. Is it okay? So it's showing the first slide.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Let me scroll through. Here we go.
Yes, this one. So below the red, that's the 33.5. So it's above that they're requesting the setback. But the top portion of the building isn't going to be brought out to the 0, right? It's just like that fence amenity area.
Oh, that's correct. So from do I have a site plan image shown? I'm not sure if I have the site plan. So here, this shows it. So it's not going to be brought to 0 at the street level. It's only 0 along the side and rear. So because then that's based on if I go back to here, you can see the outline of the property. So it's hugging these property lines here.
Oh, the building in the back is, and the top part is okay.
Yeah, so the 11-meter requirements from this property boundary, and then these rear ones, and then the side. So it's this area that they're requesting the variance. This will be patio space. So it's
Okay, perfect. So it's in that back part that'll be that 0 is being requested.
that's right. Yes.
Perfect. Great. No, I just was making sure I was understanding that. Thank you.
Great.
Julian, any questions for you?
Yes. I reviewed the wind impact report, and they mentioned the screens to make the rooftop patio wind speed within the tolerable limits for people there. However, my question is what we see in the slides and in your presentation. By the way, thank you, Dean, for your presentation. Are those the windscreens, or is that just the glass railing as it shows on the drawings? That's my question.
Sure. I will. I'll share my screen again. Advance to that elevation. Here is this highlighted area. It's cut off in my note, but you can see wind. That is the windscreen there proposed, and then also this glass railing. So
Dean, sorry to interrupt. It hasn't come up yet.
oh, I'm sorry. What screen am I sharing? Let me stop sharing for a second and try and. Okay. There, do you see my opening slide again?
Now, yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay. There. So on this elevation, here on the top, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So it's that would be the windscreen, and it's cut off as I was mentioning but it's in the staff report. So that's windscreen, but also the wind study also identifies a glass railing also as a means of mitigating that wind, and that's proposed right here. So it would be those two features that would help mitigate the wind. And in addition to that, landscaping is also identified. So tree plantings could be brought there as an additional way to mitigate that wind.
Good, thank you, Dean.
I'm not sure about point of order. I see Charlotte's got her hand up. Annie, are we allowed to circle back, or do we need to go through the list and then start again?
Totally at your discretion.
Charlotte, I assume it's related to this question. Go for
Yes,
it.
it is. I'm like, I had noticed the side wind panels there on the drawing, but I'm wondering if the railing on that side would be high enough according to their drawing. Having worked on another quite tall building in downtown Halifax, at that height, that railing would not suffice to block the wind. So at certain times of the year, people wouldn't be able to go onto that terrace comfortably. So probably having an additional like height on the side that's of concern would probably be advisable.
I could add to that just real quickly. I do remember that the report did say a minimum of 2 meters would be good to block it. So that's I can't quite confirm that on this drawing, but in terms of the height, that was 2 meters, I think was what the study suggested.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. My questions were also related to the wind screening. So I think those have been answered, or we'll hear from the design team. Nathan, did you have any questions?
No, not at this time. No, thank you.
Okay. Rob, how about you?
Yeah, just Dean, thanks for the presentation. I know we're not supposed to pick up on variances, but I wondered how, I know there's a mid-rise setback from interior lot lines of 5.5. I'm just wondering where, did that change recently?
That setback requirements, it's because this is in the center block, it's waived. So properties within the center block area aren't required to have that mid-rise setback that you're speaking about.
Okay, and the I know the new wind protocols as part of center plan have talked about comparisons between existing conditions, and so mostly it's the impact of this building on the surrounding streets, and but I don't see any simulations of existing conditions so that you can compare and contrast the before.
Yeah, the requirements that we provide to the wind specialists aren't as detailed as they are coming out through center plan.
Okay.
So the requirements that are listed under center plan have been refined through learning experience of requiring wind studies in downtown.
Great. So that's coming for here in the future.
I assume package B, yeah, the requirements you're speaking about will be required. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Sandrine, how about you?
No question for me, thanks.
Questions? Okay, so that's everyone that's present from the committee. Next, we'll turn it over to Kendall Taylor and Connor Taylor from Root Architecture for the applicant presentation.
Thank you very much. Just point of clarification, Connor Clark and Kendall
Connor
Taylor.
Clark, sorry.
Not a problem, though.
I was reading off my script. My apologies.
Yeah, no problem. So again, it's on me to share the screen, as I was told that someone else would be doing it, but I can do it myself, I guess.
You can, go ahead.
Oh, someone else has done it anyways. That works perfectly. Oops, give me 1 second. Okay, great. Hello to everyone. Thank you for having us involved in this meeting. Again, my name is Connor Clark. I'm an intern architect here at Root Architecture, and I'm joined with the principal at Root, Kendall Taylor, who is also the project architect, and he will assist in us addressing any questions afterwards as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned, I'm just going to give a short presentation on these topics for design background for the Bedford Row project for your consideration of the Design Review Committee. Next slide, please. And one more as well. So for project location, apologies if I'm touching on some of the same things Dean talked about, but as most of you know, Bedford Row is a very unique urban street in downtown Halifax, just above lower water and the waterfront boardwalk. The street itself is quite interesting because of its small nature, only running for the 3 blocks from Sackville to George Street at the top of the screen. Being so small, it doesn't receive much through traffic, which really creates a quieter setting and allows a very unique character in public space on the street. Next slide, please. On the left images, you can see some of this character at play, as Dean mentioned before. Extra wide sidewalks exist on the east side in front of our building, which are paired with existing raised planter beds and a good amount of tree cover, which each in their own are pretty rare occurrences in any downtown core. And again, this makes the street extremely pedestrian friendly, which paired with the little amount of vehicular traffic leads to special opportunities for use of the street. Which you can see on the right image, which is showing recent HRM closure to a portion of Bedford Row to vehicles. And this allowed a public takeover of the street with outdoor concerts and dining for, I think, the past 2 years. So for us, this is kind of an obvious next step for our project to build upon this success as a public street and expand on this as a welcomed outdoor space in downtown Halifax. All this being said, a lot of the existing neighboring buildings on Bedford Row are host to mostly only office space, which means that they're often vacant after work hours, and other than McKelvey's and the Old Triangle restaurants. There's really a lack of activity that could be seen on the rest of Bedford Row. So ultimately, the project we're proposing for 1649 really aims to bolster the success of Bedford Row as a unique pedestrian-friendly street, mostly by introducing residential tenancy and creating more opportunities for commercial space and public life. Next slide, please. With the built form established mostly through bylaws, the next important architectural consideration is the use of materials in connection to the building's context. As you can see here, brick is the predominant material on the streetscape of Bedford Row, visible in heritage, restoration, and some contemporary projects. Again, the anchors to this experience are mostly the Old Triangle Building and McKelvey's, two projects seen here on the top left. And the strong material context is yet another unique characteristic of Bedford Row that we intend to respect. And what I mean by that is use of similar brick coloring and massing that is reminiscent of these 2-, 3-, and 4-story facades. This project will be contextual, but also look to enhance the existing materiality of the street. Next slide, please. Just a quick look at studying built precedents. Our focus was, again, on the respect for the heritage materiality, but with an introduction of some modern elements that are complementary. You can see some examples of this approach in the center, the Roy Building and RBC Waterside on the bottom right. Most of the buildings shown here are working with a podium setback, which is, as mentioned, required by the Downtown Halifax Land Use Bylaw. And this really allows an appearance of a smaller scale brick building at the street front with a differentiated tower above, really creating two elements that speak to each other, but also have a change in scale as you move up the building. And this idea is important to us as it allows residents in the lower levels to more closely interact with the street level below them. And we'll be creating some of that missing activity after work hours that I had mentioned previously. Next slide, please. Going into proposal and renderings. Next slide, please. This is the main rendering for the proposal. First of all, you can understand off the bat from this image that the lot is quite small, at less than 55 feet or 17 meters wide at the front, which is obviously a limiting factor looking at the size of a building you can propose on this lot, while working within bylaws, providing a suitable number of units and a good amount of usable floor space. For massing, the building was designed as of right. Massing is designed from HRM bylaws and working again to maximize the floor plate. With the setback breaking up the massing into the podium and tower sections, creating the smaller scale brick facade at the street, which is more complementary to its neighbors. The podium massing itself is broken up in a few ways. Residential units, you can see, are grouped vertically and recessed in twos to create a bit of depth and repetition in the lower facade. Horizontally, a strong band reveal is introduced at level 4 in a contrasting metal panel. This element is intended to break up the height of that area, the brick facade, and visually connect to the existing 2-, 3-, and 4-story buildings on Bedford Row that I had previously mentioned. And quickly on the 6th floor, there's a extra depth created with recessed balconies that really mark the top of the podium. At night, some downlighting will be providing interest and shadows on the brick material below. And that works ultimately to enhance this line as the top of the street facade. Overall, project materials are simple. They're brick, a few colors of metal panel, some small amounts of finished concrete, and glazing, which is an intentionally minimal list to not compete with the strength of the brick on the street, but kind of allow it to take precedence. And although the podium and the tower differ in their material approach, the use of matching metal panels throughout connect different parts in a more subtle manner, which tie the whole together. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick rendering showing potential future conditions with developed neighbors. We show this image only to explain that in working on this project, we designed the proposal for both the short and long term to be able to stand alone with its own strong materials, while also designing for a future with possibility of all 3 interior lot lines developed against and therefore hidden. Next slide, please. To touch quickly on the building layout, as Dean mentioned, we're proposing a total of 33 residential units. The layout for every floor is really focused on the main Bedford Row frontage, with the goal to maximize natural light on this facade to all units. Specifically in this level 2 floor plan, we can see how the type plan has been maximized for light and open space. on a lot that is not square and has only the one facade directly, only one facade that is directly not on a lot line. It'll give us something to work with. Really how this layout is achieved is with the condensed scissor stair and elevator core you can see at the back, which as mentioned before is the smallest portion of the lot, which we can say confidently that this is one of the harder challenges of this design process, is to create that compact core that really allows a maximized space and to have a usable number of units on each floor, while also getting your required access and fire exiting at the back. So achieving this core is really the crutch to allow the 3-unit organization to continue through all the residential floor levels. And again, the focus on maximizing potential windows onto the street. Next slide, please. At the ground level here, you can see that the project is really about connecting the building users to the public street. There's 2 weather-protected entryways, one for the residential lobby and one for commercial space. And between these 2, glazing is maximized across this ground floor to create the most animated and transparent streetscape that we could. Like other commercial spaces on the street, we have the ability to take full advantage of great urban space in front and provide possibilities for spillout activity. And obviously these ideas continue to build on the HRM's approach mentioned earlier to partial closings of the street for public use. Above the ground floor, you will see also extensive glazing into the units, both to provide interior natural light and to give the residents presence on the street with the ability to open these sliding doors. These residential recesses are finished with brick returns, modern materials, and some finer grained elements such as the metal picket railings you can see. These were chosen in these levels rather than going with a full glass rail, just to add some finer grained character to this part of the design. Next slide, please. As we move above the podium, the tower takes on a different aesthetic, creating a little bit of a distinction from the contextual street front. A lighter color metal panel is introduced with some smaller elements and colors pulled out from the podium design. Again, glazing is maximized for each unit, and repetition and grouped windows create a pattern to this part of the facade. With the step back in place as required, cantilevered balconies are introduced, excuse me, which open towards Bedford Row as the units become slightly smaller. And as Dean mentioned, on the north and south facade, you can see to the left the introduction of some smaller windows directly on the lot line to just bring more light into the smaller units, which will need to be fire rated for the interim. Quickly to touch on the roof up here, the elevator and the stair car are the only elements that go up to this level, simply to provide access to the amenity room and the landscape rooftop terrace.
Connor, just sorry I realized we didn't say at the beginning that there was a time limit, but we're at 10 minutes. So if you could just maybe quickly go through the rest of your presentation. I'm not sure how much more you have left.
I can quickly skim through. So if we quickly go to the next slide, just to touch on this topic, the rear challenge, it's a challenge to design kind of the blank walls on these interior lot lines. And we designed facades where we could to pull materials around and really focus on this rear elevator tower, which with different sizes of metal panels, really try to facilitate some shadow and light that uses this as a focus element. Next slide, please. You can just see some examples of similar approaches to blank walls and varied panel size. Next slide. These are simply views that are from the street. I've already talked about. Next slide. Again, from Lower Water Street, focusing on that gray material. There will also be a lighting fixture installed at the top of this elevator core, and that's to mark the top, but to also, again, reflect the materiality below. Next slide, I can wrap up quickly. The building was essentially designed to fit within the context of the city around it, both at the predominantly brick Bedford Row street front as well as the skyline. And we'll just go next slide. In summary of working on such a tight lot, our intention was to design a building that's both contextual and modern, that maximizes an efficient layout to provide natural light to all tenants while working specifically within the limitations of the downtown land use bylaw to create an as of right project. Apologies for going over my time, but that's all I have. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for wrapping up so quickly. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So now we will open it up to questions by the committee. I'll call on each and you can address them to Connor or Kendall. Erica, start with you.
Okay, I have a few questions. If we can look at, I'm looking at slide 14. So obviously you're saying the back is the fire escape, and I'm one of the civilians of the committee, so I don't know like the design reasons behind everything. So there is absolutely no way to put any windows on that piece, right?
That's correct. You can put them there, but there would have to be fire shutters. And the only way for this little lot to accommodate the dual exiting and the elevator requirements and the mechanical shafts, that is the only place that they really fit that we can put units at the front of the building.
Right. And then what about, so there's like the big, I don't know the good words to use this, but the big jet out at the back, that's definitely the fire escape. But then there's that extra like kind of corner piece, and I'm only referring to the qualitative elements of this approval process. But can windows go on that piece, or what's there? What's in that kind of where it's the square bit that's in between the units and the fire escape?
Connor, I think it's the first section of gray panel in the corner. That's the entry into the corridor to the exit stair.
Actually, this portion will be part of the residential units, this slim gray tall piece, yes.
Okay, so with that slim gray tall piece, is there absolutely no opportunity to put windows on the maybe backside? I don't know what room that is in the design on the backside of the tower?
They can, yeah, they can be added. By the way, I'm just going to say I'm at my parents' 1970-ish cottage, which is why I'm not showing the background. I tried to blur it out and I didn't get the technology put together. Yeah, certainly adding these windows, it can be done. It's a window plus a $5,000 fire shutter is what it is. And eventually we assume that the adjacent property will be developed and these windows will have to be removed at some point.
So that would be on the right side, but on the very back there wouldn't be, because it's not, you can't abut that because your fire escape comes out much further than that. So that one strip could possibly have windows.
If it's not in the actual by definition an exit stair assembly, then we could consider it. Yeah.
I guess it's, I don't know how much that would add to the cost of the unit, and I don't know if like that would make it not feasible to buyers or how that calculation ends up happening. But I just, for me personally, like as just a civilian, I'm not like stoked on the back of the building just having no windows, and I'm sure you guys aren't probably either. So in terms of approving the qualitative element of the building, I feel more iffy on that approval, just because when you look at slide 18 and you see all these buildings with windows, and then it's like just this one without, and you're like, what's that? And I see that you've tried to kind of provide some type of movement and additional features with the paneling having the different sizes. And I'm just wondering, as the committee goes through, if they have any questions, if they have any suggestions, because I don't work in this space, to how we could continue to elevate the back of the building. Like I know in the Kennard block, like they did some kind of cantilevered large planters that added some green. And I don't know, because it's a fire escape, if that is completely impossible. But I guess I'll just throw it out there to the committee as they go through, if they have any ideas on how to animate the back of the building a little bit more to make it more interesting. I'm just throwing it out there. And that's it for me.
There we go. Thanks, Erica. Jess, on to you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm kind of echoing a little bit what Erica's saying. Like, I think you guys have done a really great job of, I liked all the articulation you guys have put in the building and all the different use of materials. I think it's great. Again, not being an architect, so not sure what constraints are here, but that whole back bump out you're saying where the elevator and the stairwell is, that can't have windows, correct?
Correct.
Okay, no, I mean, I'm with it. I understand that side of it that we can't, but I do also echo it'd be great to see some sort of window in the back there. I'm not sure how much that helps, but I do echo her comments.
So can I just, the three sides of this building have two major issues. One is, how do we build the wall over top of an existing building? We're still sorting through that. And B is that all three of those walls have to be fire rated. The way we're basically at zero lot line. So the only way to put penetrations is to have fire shutters inside the units, which because of the floor to floor height, fire shutter boxes are about 16 inches square, and they'd be mounted on the face with a steel track down the window. They would not be attractive inside a small unit at all.
Gotcha.
That's not to take away from your comments, but yeah, and they're roughly around $5,000, and they would need to be tested every year and so on and so forth. So yeah, this isn't really relevant to this discussion today, but we do know that there are other projects that are going to eventually build up in those two properties, and you know, it's an investment in the short term from the owner's perspective, to knowing that they're probably going to have to remove them at some point down the road.
I know it's Jess's time, but I just want to say thanks, Kendall, for like providing that further context,
Yes.
because knowing how it's going to look on the inside does matter as well. So yeah.
Sure,
yes, no, thank you very much. That was great.
Yeah, they're ugly. I'm not going to lie to you. They are. and it'll force us to make the windows quite low because of the floor to floor is only 7'11" and a half. So
Okay.
we'd be taking 16 inches out of that. So they definitely would be sticking down in the space.
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for you, Jess?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Julian, you're next.
Yeah, one question. When you talk about the rooftop patio, is that the whole extent of that terrace? So the rooftop patio, does it end at the railings? And also the wind impact study, I can't help looking into that, to my experience in the city with the hurricane. So the report suggests movable screens 2 meters high. What we see in the drawings is the same height as the railings of the balconies, which would be roughly 1.10 meters high. Who would, let's say in the future, there's a venue there, there's a restaurant or whatever, and who would be, how would you ensure that what the wind impact suggests or recommends, and we know that wind impact studies are very scarce, if not non-existent, in buildings that already have been built in the city, who would ensure that those movable screens would be put up there? And my question is there any architectural way to provide, I don't know, something that stays in place 2 meters high, as it suggests, instead of what we see now, which is the railings, in case the whole terrace is the rooftop patio? That's my question. And thank you for your presentation, Connor. Very nice.
No problem.
And very nice. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm trying, so I think what we are going to do from the comments you already made about that is the railings are currently 4 feet high, and we are going to take a close look at what we can do there. The vertical elements are going to screen the people from approaching the exits so that the wind is not causing any sort of issues with doors opening and closing and ripping the doors off when they're open, et cetera, et cetera. But that south face is where the wind study said that they would recommend something up there. So we're gonna, our takeaway here is to look at something that's either fixed and or reach out to them about the the real effects of having a tree and a planting element at that height, and really how well it's going to survive. And I think we'll reach out to them and see what their input is.
Julian, any other?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
questions
No,
on this? Okay. I don't have any questions at this time. Nathan, anything for you?
Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation. I understand the challenge that you've had with likely addressing future development around the sides of the building as well too. I think the view from the Bedford Row looks fantastic. I guess you get around from the other side on the water side, and it's almost like it's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde building too. So it almost seems like two separate buildings. But I recognize the challenges that you have there, and I don't really have a suggestion what to do there. But I agree with some of the committee members who commented on the windows. You kind of like to see the windows there, but I understand that you may not be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, the footprint itself, when you take it's only 54 feet wide and it's not square at the back. We're going to put a crane up there. It would probably need a 10-foot by 10-foot hole in the floor. There's hardly anything left, and the construction manager, we still haven't drilled into how you would actually build the back. So logistically speaking, those buildings are some of them are wood frame construction, and there's some other issues the owner has to deal with on that front. But really challenging to go back there with masonry or anything heavy, building over top the adjacent buildings. So the pragmatic approach is to try and find a solution with lightweight panels. We're currently looking at an insulated metal panel system, which has a fire rating and will attach the metal to it. Something that can come pre-assembled.
Is just a quick follow-up. Thank you for that explanation. Just a quick follow-up question. Is there anything that you can do to maybe play? Like I've noticed that you've got some different textured panels, different size panels, maybe a different color of panels to splash a little bit of color and make it a little more interesting from the water side, or?
We can certainly look at color. The option of looking at some sort of mural or some sort of print screen application was discussed. There's a variety of things we've been talking about in the background.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering the questions. I appreciate it. That's all for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Rob, any questions for you?
No, just a couple of comments that I know the neighboring property, 1657, which is a through lot from Lower Water to Bedford Row, is a 2-story. It's got to be one of the most desirable redevelopment sites in the city that's not directly on the waterfront. So it wouldn't surprise me that that lot doesn't have much of a life as a 2-story building. So all these features about that back wall. I actually quite like the gray wall, that you're not drawing attention to a blank wall with color, because right across the street, Scott McCrae's building, which is a 15-story building, is all those muted earth tone colors as well. So I kind of like it staying gray and background. And I wanted to just comment on the wind piece as well. With the 15-story, in the northwest corner, you're right that the front facade at the elevation of the roof podium is going to get a lot of wind, and it'd be very tough to have a tree or anything grow up there. I think your best solution is a higher railing or some sort of perforated paneling up there to break up the wind.
All right, thanks, Rob. Sandrine, any questions for you?
No, I don't have a further question, but I also suggest to think about the color from the waterfront. That could be a little bit more attractive, I think.
Okay, thank you. Sarah and Christina are not here, so Charlotte.
Hello, thank you for the presentation as well. It was very clear. Regarding the back of the building, I agree with Rob. I think considering all the constraints and all the the lot issues and the fact that the neighboring developments will eventually rise to kind of meet the same height, you've done a pretty good job at hiding the fact that you don't have windows, in my opinion, because when you look from further away, it seems like there are, thanks to those different width panels. You'll have to, crane your neck quite high from the street to be able to see the top of that building. So you'd only see the kind of lack of windows from the water, I believe, or from the very end of the pier. So there is, I think because it's such a thin building, it should be okay. And then again, because of those firewalls, and then having to take them off later on once the other buildings come up would be quite a hassle for the people living in the buildings and the building as a whole. It would be like quite a bit of work. Regarding the top patio now, that's my second kind of point. Definitely need at least 2 meter, what's it called? Windbreaker on the, I can't remember which side it was.
It's south side. There's a south side.
On the south side, yes. Yeah. And I saw on the document we were given, the one with the wind study, some of the images there were interesting. Regarding plants, you wouldn't be able to grow a tree up there, as in a full-grown tree. You would have to go with small shrubs or smaller species of perennials, because it wouldn't survive with the amount of wind as well as with the amount of like the temperatures you would get up there. Another concern regarding landscaping up there is you don't have a huge amount of space. So you wouldn't be able to put raised planters anywhere near the railings, because then you would have a potential climbing onto the planter and jumping over the railing of, children or accidents, which is a problem I had to fix a few months ago on a different building. So you'd have to really look at how you could landscape the terrace regarding the, in my opinion, very restrained dimensions of that patio terrace. But having plants up there would be pretty nice for the people living there. I think that's, I had one more, I just remembered real quick. The bottom part, the entrance and commercial space, I noticed that on your slide number 6, your presentation, you have photos of other buildings on Bedford Road that have a very traditional and kind of arched entrances and windows at the very bottom of the building. And I also noticed an email we got from a member of the public stating that it was a bit too bland at the bottom with the entire window the whole way. And it would be nice to maybe have at the center where you have, so you have 3 window units and you have so two sides at the very end that are with the gray that kind of calls back to the band on the fourth floor. Maybe putting bands on the other pillars instead of just having the pillars inside might kind of make that bottom floor a little bit more linked to the main building instead of kind of the square brick sitting on air, which looks a little bit strange to me. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess you're waiting for me to answer. Yeah.
We see Connor nodding, but
I saw Connor nodding, which kind of was pretty good. All right, that's all I would have to say. Otherwise, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll I'll ask someone to put the motion on the floor so that it can be debated. If okay, not right now. I was in a meeting. Okay. If I could get someone to read the motion, if you have it, or if we can get it put in the chat, I guess, as a start. Oh, Annie, sorry.
Yeah, no worries, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to suggest that given that we're getting close to the 6:30 time, that it might be a good time to put forward a motion to extend the duration of the meeting. This would require a mover and a seconder, but if there's a consensus as to, you know, how long the committee thinks the meeting could be extended for, that can be kind of agreed to and then put in the motion itself.
We've gone down this road before, so I don't want to extend it too long. How long does everybody have for tonight? We extended it by up to 30 minutes. Do you think we could wrap it up in 30 minutes and give it its due time? Okay, so then can we get a motion to extend the meeting by 30 minutes to 7 o'clock?
I'll motion to
Charlotte, and a seconder, please.
Second.
Nathan, thank you, everyone. And do we need to vote on that, Annie? We do? Okay. So everyone in favor of extending the meeting by 30 minutes to 7 o'clock, say aye.
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 Ayes. Are there any nays? Okay, I think we're extended until 7. So then going back to the motion, there are the 3 elements of the motion. And if we could get that put in the chat, and then if someone would please put the motion forward. There it is.
I have it. I can read it if you want.
Sure, Erica, yeah, if you could.
Does that mean I'm putting it on the floor?
It's in the chat now, so
Okay.
if you're reading it, yeah.
I'll read it. The Design Review Committee motion that 1, approve the qualitative elements of the substantive site plan approval application for a 12-story mixed-use building on lands at 1649 Bedford Row, Halifax, as shown in attachment A of the staff report dated July 21st, 2021. Approve the 1 variance to the land use bylaw requirements regarding internal property line setbacks for the high-rise portion of the development as contained in attachment B of the staff report dated July 21st, 2021. And 3, accept the findings of the qualitative wind impact assessment as contained in attachment C of the staff report dated July 21st, 2021.
Thank you, Erica. Could I get a seconder for the 3 elements of the motion? Rob?
Yep.
Perfect. I won't make you read it all out.
Great.
So then we'll go through the committee members and see if everyone has a few minutes to discuss any comments or questions they have related to the motion that is put forward. We'll start with Jess.
Not really anything much to say other than said. I think that due to the constraints on the site, they've done a great job here to provide something that I think will be great, and they've done a really good use of materials and articulation that I really like.
Okay. Julian, any comments or questions?
Yes. Is it possible to use the option of approve with conditions? in this case, the conditions would be that the project has in place the railing height, so that it's in the project.
To raise the railing height to,
Or, yes, or to include in the project a mention in drawings in the project that this should refer to the wind impact study. I don't know how to word it, but so that it's in writing in the project that the recommendation by the professionals who did the study was to raise the railing height to 2 meters.
okay. So that
Is there a requirement that it has to be 2 meters? So did Dean say that, or did
I
I
think Dean
mishear?
said that the report said that it should be at least 2 meters.
Right,
It's
it's not a
a
requirement by
recommendation.
HRM.
No, there's not.
Okay.
All right, I checked it. It's Kendall. I checked it and it does say 2 meters. And Julian, you have my personal guarantee that it'll get done. And it's not going to be with trees. It's going to be something permanent. Yeah. You're all my witnesses.
So I guess as a point of order, and I'm sorry, Kendall, this,
That's okay, sorry.
I just want to make sure, do we need to amend the motion to include that?
The motion is about accepting the findings of the wind impact assessment, and that it already says that it should be 2 meters.
That's
at
true.
least 2
Yes,
meters.
it does. Would that satisfy your concern, Julian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Julian, Marcel's not here. I would agree. Thank you for the presentations, everyone. I know I haven't said a lot about the actual design, but I feel like it's definitely a challenging site, and that you've done the best you can with it. There, obviously there's some concerns noted, but understanding that there's future development planned for the area and the adjacent sites, I think it will fit in well. That's all I have to share. Nathan, did you have any comments or questions?
No, my only concern was the handrail and whether or not that was being addressed. So thank you for that.
Okay. Rob, how about you?
No, I think, in cities, these little infill blocks can be some of the most interesting buildings, and Kendall's done a great job of doing an interesting infill. It'll be a tough site to build on. And, looking at the design manual, I think it's pretty clear, in 3.6.6 that it says the height of the building substantially lower than the maximum permitted building height. And the setback being proportional. So I think it meets that requirement. So I'm comfortable with all three.
Okay, great. Sandrine, any comments or questions for you?
No further comments. I'm okay.
Great. Charlotte?
Definitely no trees, just permanent railing. That would not be a good idea. Unless you want trees falling. And then just that little note about the bottom floor, I think would a bit more like match it to the rest of the building.
Is that what I mean?
Yeah, a bit like to match the commercial more to the building, because it kind of looks completely detached right now. That would be my only kind of condition that I would put, if possible.
Can I ask a question, just in that suggestion wouldn't relate to something that we as design review committee would have a say on, because it's not part of the variance request. I'm just wondering what the committee's take on non-variance suggestions.
We do have purview, Rob, sorry, it's
Yeah.
Erica, just as the
Yeah.
previous chair. So Charlotte's comment would apply to one, which is the qualitative elements. So she would be asking for an exception for them, that we would only approve that if they did X, Y, and Z thing. So in past cases, we said you should add some downlighting to where Obladi is in that redo, because we
Gotcha.
wanted to articulate the columns a little bit more. So that's how her comment would apply. The committee would have to agree to it, though. Like, she could put forward wanting to add this motion, then we would all have to say yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
It's not a huge but I think it would add a little bit more character to that bottom floor.
So in terms of amending the first point of the motion, what would you like to see there, Charlotte?
I think if we look at the fourth floor of the building, they have two metal gray panelings that match to some other parts of the building. And having those two gray like material carry vertically down to the bottom floor, I think would link that bottom area more to the building.
If I could jump in, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Connor.
I'm able to share. It might not be as clear as we'd imagined from these renderings. Oh, I'm unable to share. Is someone able to bring up the PowerPoint presentation?
Just one moment here.
No problem.
And what slide do you need, Connor?
We should go for slide 10. Sorry, is everyone able to see that? I'm not actually seeing it on my screen.
There you go, it's loaded.
Sorry, folks. The loading is really taking a long time. Jill, would you be able to bring the presentation back up in Adobe, please? It's a little too slow to load. Perfect.
Here we go. So this, we can actually just talk about this slide if we want to. Just to address some of your comments, this was something that we attempted to do, and it's potentially very hard to see in these renderings, but around the residential entry on the lower left-hand side of this image, and at the far right side where there's actually a fire exit there, we have implemented the same, you could call it charcoal or gray metal paneling as we have in that band. Not to say that your comment is incorrect, you could still advise that we add more of this paneling to attach to them, but I just wanted to clarify that if the thought was that the entire ground floor facade was glass, there are actually some solid portions that have some of that gray metal paneling as well.
I noticed the side ones. It was just the two center kind of
pillars. I see, you're talking about
that,
the two vertical centers.
Yes, that they flow through from the very top of the building all the way down, except they suddenly stop for the ground floor, which kind of breaks that one building view and makes the brick building kind of float. And I think just a little bit of a follow through with those two would be nice.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of, sorry, I keep coming back to the motion to try to figure out what we're going to be voting on here. If there was, so it's related to item 1, approving the qualitative elements. I don't know if there's a suggestion of how we want to amend that to.
Marilee, you might want to see if there would be like support on it before you like craft anything, because if the vote isn't, because I mean, for me personally, like I could go either way, adding it to the motion or not. I kind of like to leave it up to the architects with these kind of more interpretive comments. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should see if it's worth crafting.
No, that's fair. Oh, Annie, sorry.
I was just going to say, I would, of course, be happy to kind of draft the motion. I think I would need a little bit of guidance in terms of the particular phrasing that we're looking for, because I'm hearing ideas, but I'm not entirely certain as to how it would actually pertain to the design manual or to the qualitative aspects that are being discussed. So, I mean, we could either go through with crafting that motion, having it moved and seconded and put on the floor, or if you wanted to kind of just test the waters and do a bit of a straw poll to see how people are feeling about that idea before crafting that motion, that's within your purview.
Yeah, I think, okay, I see Kendall's got his hand up and may have a response, and then we can go back to the group. Kendall, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, we like the fact that it floats, but that's again a personal thing. But the inside of that commercial space, because of this size of this footprint, has been nipped away and chewed away. We hoped we had a certain square footage to bring the Great Wall of China back again, and it's really getting nipped away. So it's almost to a point of being an impractical size, and so it couldn't be that it's making I guess less natural light in there wouldn't help that. The other part is, as architects, if we were going to explore this, we would want to study both of them in 3D, take a look at them, and see how it looks. So I guess my question is, how do we move forward with that? What's that process look like, and what's the process?
Well, I guess at this point, we put it to the committee to see how strongly we feel about adding in those elements, or are we comfortable providing the feedback, but not necessarily, and the comments that have been provided and then Charlotte's brought to the table, without necessarily amending the motion. So I'm going to just open that up to the group at this point. Does anybody have any strong feelings one way or the other?
Maybe as long as it's looked into, it should be okay. It's just a suggestion that I think could be looked at. I understand the lack of space. It's just I can see those pillars because there are structural pillars anyway there, and the metals wouldn't have to be very white, so it wouldn't remove that much light, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't change that much. It's just something to look at, maybe on your own models and everything, and see if you could maybe tie it in a bit better.
In my mind, if it was a street activated use like a cafe or something, having as much window space would be a good thing. But not knowing who's going to go in there, it's tough to say whether you want to constrain a future owner by blocking some of that window space.
Mm-hmm. Dean, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I can just provide some insight on the design manual and what it says in this regard. So the design manual does encourage 75% of the ground floor to be transparent. So I don't know what those columns would do to that, but that's just something to keep in mind as a guide to this design that's proposed. And also the design manual calls for like a base, middle, and top. So part of the argument by the architect was that constitutes some of the base, that ground floor. And I would just add, if you do add conditions, that they be as specific as possible for the development officer to implement. So that's all I'd like to add.
Okay, thank you. So I think if I'm understanding Charlotte correctly, you would be comfortable with just leaving the motion as is, but we've made the suggestion in the comments, and hopefully that's a takeaway for Kendall and Connor as part of their ongoing design process.
Yes.
Would the rest of the committee be comfortable with that?
Yes.
Are you nodding?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I think that puts us back to the original agenda. In that, no, that's okay. This is what the debate's for. We want to make sure we've taken the time to have the discussion. So we have a motioner and a seconder. Sorry, where are we? I believe Erica, did you have any comments or questions related to the motion?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You're good. Okay, so if there are no further questions from the committee members, I will ask that all those in favor say aye to pass the motion as is noted in the chat.
Aye.
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 Are there any nays? No? And with that, it appears that the motion has passed. So in that case, we have no other preliminary presentations and all the other items are, so our next meeting is scheduled for September 9th, 2021. If I could ask for a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
I'll move.
Thanks, Rob.
Second.
And second with Nathan. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. We only needed an extra 15 minutes. That's not bad.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the presentations, everyone.